treasuries are not getting the bid that you might imagine given the sell-off, the scope of the sell-off we're seeing in equities. Why do you think there's that asymmetry?
I think one big question is, what's China going to do? China holds over 1.1 trillion of treasuries. We're clearly picking a fight with China. If they decide they're going to go on a buyer's strike or worse, indicate they might sell, I think that's part of the reason treasuries aren't quite rallying the way you would normally expect them.
But even before, I mean, back in February, that was sort of the defining characteristic of that sell-off. And you've written a lot about risk parity or risk parity light portfolios, which is sort of like buy a little bit of everything. It's just not working that great.
That is correct. I've kind of talked about risk parity light as anything that you own equities and then you own long-dated bonds as a hedge against that. And that worked phenomenally well. Last year was a phenomenal year. It's, had almost no volatility, had very strong returns. It's not working well this year, and I think that's starting to force some unwinds. As volatility increases, that strategy gets a little bit more tenuous. And so that's why we're getting these days where you get, they're both moving down in the same direction is the worst problem. And that's been happening a little bit.
What's the distinction of this round of selling? What sets it apart from what we saw earlier in February? I mean, after the fact, we knew that the volatility ETFs, the low vol ETFs, were contributing to the sense of panic. But we're not seeing that same dynamic play out this time around.
Right. That's why I'm actually more concerned right now, is that back then we kind of were all over what was going on with the VIX ETFs. We saw that as a potential threat. That worked out. But everyone, including myself, was fine with the fundamentals, right? Mm-hmm. We had just had the tax cuts or tax reform, however you want to call them. Everyone was really comfortable the fundamentals were good. Now all of a sudden you've got these tax issues. You've got some tech companies that are having a little bit of trouble. The case for fundamentals being strong is a little bit less so this time around. And from a technical standpoint, this would be the third time we touch this 200-day moving average on the futures. If that happens again, I think we fall through right now.
And of course, in the cash market too, I'm looking at the S&P 500 right now, basically sitting at the 200-day moving average, at least during the intraday. And you can see that the last time we fell below that was on February 9th.
Go on about the fundamentals, because that has been the story that the bulls tell is that, oh yeah, whatever happens at the White House, whatever happens with the Fed, you just can't deny rock solid earnings and a global synchronized recovery. And ultimately, everything else is a distraction besides the fundamentals. But what you're saying is that maybe the fundamental story getting slightly less compelling.
Yeah, and especially if we are going to go up against China and have some sort of, whether it's a trade war, ultimately, I believe our ultimate goal is to sit down at the table with China and negotiate something about intellectual property rights. I think that's the real end game here, is really starting to try and protect intellectual property rights. And that's what I think the market has missed. So this trade war is just the start of it. And Trump is very serious about this. I think when he looks at things like North Korea, he says, hey, 20 years ago, had we done something when we could have, we would not have a nuclearized North Korea. So I think he's a little bit more adamant about resolving intellectual property rights in China than the market's been giving him credit. And that is why this sell-off is real and probably continues.
Okay, but in the meantime, investors are taking...
Sorry about that. I had a little sickness I picked up from the weekend, so don't mind the cough. But, one issue I want to bring up, I don't understand why intellectual property is such a big deal to go to trade war with, because it doesn't benefit any of us. I mean, intellectual property is good for the elites, and it's not necessarily good for innovation. I mean, it basically just helps monopolies and even patents. I know that patents are supposed to help, foster innovation, but when people have 9-year, 15-year patents, I mean, it's just basically, first off, it's not a free market, and second, it just allows people to hold monopolies, and a lot of these tech companies don't even innovate. They just sit on patents and sue people over intellectual property rights. So I don't understand how all of this is really helping anyone. And if people want to make a bootleg of whatever intellectual property you have, well, create a better one, make better technology. And if you can't compete that way, then innovate. But having laws that basically allow you to be kind of like a cartel and basically sit on a product and not be forced to change because you can just use the government to kick out your competition, I think is bogus. But to focus on the outlook of the market, I am very just out there, and what I am surprised is I was hoping the cryptocurrencies would grow with this kind of volatility and this market sell-off. It hasn't happened, as you can tell. We are basically just flatlined, which is disappointing, and I'm hoping that we finally get a bump. And if this trade war does happen, I'm hoping that the Chinese who've been buying all this U.S. debt maybe now move into other asset classes and hopefully maybe cryptocurrency, but I'm not sure. So let me know what you guys think. This channel is obviously supposed to be focused only on cryptocurrency or have a cryptocurrency-centric view, but right now the news cycle is down for crypto and it's very up for the stock market, this trade war, Trump. So I'm trying to cover this stuff, get your guys' opinion, and kind of wait and see what happens with the cryptocurrency market. But if you go through this channel and if you follow this channel, I've made predictions where if the stock market crashes, commodities like cryptocurrency, gold, silver would rally, but we haven't really seen that. So it's very interesting, and I look forward to the comments to go through it and see what you guys think. And thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you soon.